All right. In this episode, I want to cover the process. Now, remember one thing, the process is completely tied to your project schedule. And if you stay until the end, I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can improve your project schedule by up to 20%. 20% is a big chunk of time. Think about it. If you have a 1-year project, 20% is almost 2.5 months. So if you can shave off 2.5 months off your project, you do the math. So in the last episode, we talked about the players. And if you recall, I said the 2 most important things to know are the players and the process, the people and the how, the way it's done, right? So that's the process. The focus is going to be on the process of tenant improvement, but it's the same. No matter what kind of project you have, the process is the same when it comes down to the field of architecture, design, construction. So let's dive right into it, okay? But before we do, if you haven't subscribed already, please click the subscribe button because that allows me to make more educational content like this. So this diagram illustrates the typical standard sequence for all the phases of tenant improvement project. The tickers at the top is representation of units of time, whatever that may be, weeks, months. It all depends on the complexity of the project, the city you're in, and who you hire. In the middle are all the phases of a TI project in sequence. As you see, the entire process is broken into multiple phases, going from left to right, and I'm going to walk you through each phase and explain what they are and why they are in this sequence. I'm also showing each phase using a different color, so it'll be easier for you to follow. Let's start with phase 1, building selection, due diligence, and lease negotiation. This is usually the trigger for starting a TI project. This all starts with a client or a tenant looking for an office space, or perhaps their existing lease is running out and they're looking for options. They may stay put or they may move to a new location. During this phase, the involved players are usually the tenant, of course, the landlord, the brokers, sometimes the owner's rep or project manager. Now, in order for the broker to know what size or type of space the client needs, they need a program. In other words, what type of office space is needed. Now, this is when the team has to bring on an architect because the architect has to generate the program and determine the approximate amount of square feet the client needs so the brokers can narrow down options. So in reality, phase 1 and phase 2 run parallel to each other and they go hand in hand. Because the other component that is needed once the building has been considered are what's called test fits, block plans, or space plans. The block plan or test fit plan is basically a plan that determines how the tenant's people, offices, support spaces can fit within a footprint of a floor. This helps the broker and the client understand if a building works for them or if they have to keep looking for other locations. The architect may do a test fit or multiple test fits for each building. Once the tenant picks the building, that test fit or space plan gets attached to the lease. This is why these 2 phases go hand in hand. Once the building is picked and the lease is signed, we can now move into schematic design phase. This phase is the initial phase where the project's overall layout, concepts, size, functionality, and major systems are conceptually developed and presented for review and approval. During this phase, a few more of the players on the design side, like consultants, engineers, may be brought on board. This is also the phase where the budget can start to form a little better. I will have to cover the budget in a different episode because there's a lot to cover and there are many ways that budgets can be created. The next phase is design development. This phase starts after the schematic design phase has been approved. During the design development, or DD, the approved schematic design is refined. By this phase, almost all the design consultants should already be onboarded. I personally recommend that the consultants should be onboarded by Schematic Design, but unfortunately in real life that usually doesn't happen. All the concepts that were presented during SD are detailed out and further developed. You may be wondering why SD and DD are not one phase. Well, the reason for breaking down the design into multiple phases is to progressively develop and validate the design before construction begins. This lowers risks and controls costs and minimizes changes later in the process. Next phase is the construction documents. So after the DD is approved, we're now ready to go into CDs or construction documents. This is the phase where essentially the architects and consultants are putting together visual sets of instructions for how the project can be built by a contractor. The construction documents includes architectural drawings, details, and also can include other consultant drawings like mechanical, plumbing, electrical, structural, and a lot more. There are 3 reasons why we need the construction documents. We use them to get plan checked, meaning we submit them to the city for review so we can get the permits. We also issue the construction documents or CDs to the landlord for review and approval. The landlord is very interested in knowing what exactly the tenant is doing in their building, so they want to review and approve it. And then the last part is we use them to get bids from contractors. Bids are different than budgets. Bids are actual costs received from contractors to determine the cost of the project as a whole. The next phase is plan check and permitting. This is the phase where the construction drawings are submitted to the city or governing agencies for review. They usually have comments, and once we go through that, we get the approvals and get the permits needed to legally start construction. Next, we go into bidding. During this phase, the completed construction documents or sets of instructions are issued to the contractors so they can review and provide a cost for the project. There are many methods for how the project can be bid out, and I will probably cover that in a separate episode sometimes in the future. Once the costs are approved and the general contractor is contracted with, they can prepare to start construction, assuming they have the permits, of course. Then we go into construction. This is where the project moves from drawings and planning to actual construction in the field. Materials are purchased, sub-trades mobilize, and the physical space is built based on the approved construction documents. During this phase, going back and changing anything has a substantial impact on both the schedule and the cost, because you may have to take a few steps backwards. A change will require a redesign, plan check, and pricing before you can start construction. So depending on the extent of the mid-construction changes, you'll need to go back and add in additional time needed to design, plan check, and price to the overall construction schedule. When construction is completed, we go into the final stage, which is closeout. Remember, construction is not truly complete until the architect determines that the project is substantially complete. During this phase, final inspections are completed, punch list items are addressed and closed out, final approvals and sign-offs are obtained. The project team also collects and turns over all the closeout documents to the client and landlord. These documents can include inspection reports, lien releases, as-built drawings, warranties, operation and training manuals, and any other documents needed for the client to successfully operate and maintain the space after the project team has left. Now, this is the standard sequence. All of these are the typical phases. Keep in mind that there are sub-phases nested into these phases, like the furniture design, procurement, and installation process, or the technology design and implementation process. Again, the sequence for how these phases follow each other are mainly to protect the project and the players. This allows time for approvals at the end of each phase before moving forward to the next phase, which just reduces risks. Now, I know most of you watching or listening to this want to know how to make the process go by faster. And I'm going to show you, but you have to understand it comes with risks. So in this diagram, I'm showing an expedited schedule. Now the risk level on this one is medium. There are many ways to expedite the overall schedule. That could be with overtime, multiple crews, or faster decision making. But one of the easiest ways to speed up the project schedule is to stagger the phases. In this example, I'm showing the bidding process to happen at the same time plan check is happening. This can definitely save some time because while you're in plan check, you can bid the job, get the contractors ready, so by the time permits on hand, they can start. However, the risk here is that there may be plan check comments and corrections, and the bids will probably not capture those, which means you may either have to build in allowances to cover those potential plan check corrections, or have the selected general contractor and subs provide a cost after those plan checks and corrections are received. The risk here is that you will probably not get the best pricing for those changes because now you've locked in the subs and there's no room for negotiation. Now, the next option comes with a higher risk. What I'm showing is submitting the construction documents to the city before it's bid ready. This means it will include all the components related to fire life safety the city is looking for, but will most likely be missing design aesthetic elements that the city doesn't care about. Having your architect do this may cost you more because now they're generating two sets of drawings, one for plan check, one for bid. This also means your architect and consultants have to be very coordinated. In addition, I'm also showing starting design, schematic design, during or before the lease is executed. A lot of times, the space plan is approved way before the lease is signed. So instead of waiting until the lease is signed, which can take anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks or sometimes even longer, you would start schematic design immediately after the test fit or space plan is approved. The risk here is that you're incurring soft costs for your architect and consultants, knowing that if the lease negotiation goes sideways, you can lose costs associated with that phase. So on one hand, you're gaining time, which can save you money, but on the other hand, if anything goes wrong, you just lost a lot of money. And that's it, everyone. That's the typical TI process. I know I said TI process, but reality is that process applies to any design and construction project you have. It is backed by science because the step-by-step protocols have been tested and repeated, and it's been practiced for probably over a century, if not more. So hopefully this was helpful. If you do follow this the way I explained it, your chances of having a successful project is going to be substantially increased. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed, please click the subscribe button so I can create more educational content like this for you. Thank you.